Baylor football continues to rewrite their recruiting history books. It's the summer of Hall, and long may it continue on Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and The Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network. Thank you so much for making us your first listen today and every day. Locked On Baylor, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. So shout out to you everydayers out there. And this has been the theme of the summer. And truly, guys, it has helped me so much. This Baylor recruiting blaze of glory that they're on right now. I mean, it's been incredible. This is one of their best recruiting summers they've ever had. And to come off such a bad season is so impressive. So we're going to look at their newest recruit, where they could be looking for some other guys here before the summer is out for commitments and Baylor graphics to look for, as well as the stable of running backs they have right now. This is unofficially the running back episode of Locked On Baylor. But starting first with the commitment from over the weekend, another huge recruit, huge commit for the Baylor Bears, a 4-star from 247. That's, again, another 4-star. 247 is what we go off of here at Locked On Baylor. I've found it, even before we had Will Turboff on all the time, I found it to be the most consistent and the easiest to follow. And he is another 4-star by 247. His name is Ryelan Morris from Honey Grove, Texas. And he is in the class of 2026, so not the class of 2025, but he committed after the junior day festivities. And this kid is just off the charts in about anything you can think of. We talked about Ja'Cory Watson a few weeks ago, who comes in as a 4-star receiver, but he played mostly quarterback down there at Shadow Creek. And with Ryelan Morris, it's kind of the same deal, because you look at, they got a running back commit in Ryelan Morris. And then you look at his stats and you're like, are we sure this is even his best position? Because, I mean, the stats are just crazy. I mean, he played receiver, he played running back, he even played quarterback for them. And this was as a sophomore, by the way. He had 1,754 yards rushing, 888 yards throwing, and 42 total touchdowns. Played both sides of the ball, because on defense, he had 35 tackles, 4 picks, and a fumble recovery. Brother, that dude is a football player. It's listed as athlete, but he's more than that. This dude is a football player. No matter where he was put on the field in high school, he excelled. And you look at the running back talent that Baylor has been able to acquire. I mean, really, skill positions in general. That's what we've seen a lot of this summer. Someone like Jackson Blackwell from Lorena notwithstanding on the defensive line. It's been a lot of speed and skill players that have been making their commitments. Now, that's the stuff that pops off the paper for guys like me doing podcasts, and no doubt still something very exciting for Baylor. Should we be hoping for some more guys in the trenches to commit? Yeah, probably. But that's another story for another day, because the skill position guys, the ones that are very easy for us fans to kind of follow in terms of their stats and their highlight tapes, those are the guys committing to Baylor right now. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you got another one. Now, this is the class of 2026, which is the second class of 2026 recruit for the Bears, both of them at the running back position. So you've got a couple of great ones coming in next year. And then you're only 2 from 2026. You got 2 4-stars coming in this next year for 25, and then 2 high-end guys, a high-end 3-star in Davis Penn from South Lake Carroll, and now a 4-star guy in Ryelan Morris committing for 2026. So all of a sudden, 4 weeks ago or so, maybe 5, right after official visit season. Bleak's the wrong word, but it wasn't looking like, oh, wow, watch out for Baylor in the 2025 recruiting class. We have since knocked that off. Like, yeah, look out for these guys at the 2025 class that are already way up there in terms of the rankings, top 3 in the Big 12. And now they're starting to build a foundation for 2026. Let's go. Let's keep this thing going. By the way, with Morris, this is from Will Turboff. Morris also heads to Waco with eye-opening speed. This past spring, the rising junior finished 3rd in the Texas 2A 100-meter finals with a 10.84, and he won the silver medal in the 200-meter with a 21.97. I love getting sprint times around Olympic season. I really do. But whatever, because I know the 6A fans, the people who go to 6A schools or live in 6A communities, are going to be like, blah, that's not good enough. But what jumps off the page to me is an identity. Baylor is establishing an identity with the way they are recruiting. And yes, you can thank Keenan Hall for that. You can thank Dallas Baker for that, who I hope, by the way, I'm talking about Keenan Hall. Dallas Baker doesn't get lost in the fold with how on it he has been. And I think there needs to be some credit to Dave Aranda and to Jake Spavital for that. I mean, again, we've noticed these guys, they shout out their recruiters, but they also shout out Dave Aranda. They also shout out Jake Spavital. And there's something that Dave has done that is very important towards establishing this identity. And we're going to talk about what that identity has been in recruiting and how a couple of different coaches on the staff, the ones I just mentioned, have all played a hand in this after a word from our sponsors. And our first new sponsor is our friends at Ibotta. Now, look, guys, it's summer. We're going out. We're buying a lot, right? We think we're chilling out, but really we're going to the beach. We're going on vacations. We're eating new things because we got a little bit more time. You know, I mean, I'm just thinking about, I went to the beach this weekend. You got sandals, sunscreen. You need to bring snacks with it. You got the cooler. You're probably buying a ton of that this summer, right? And what we want you to do is get rewarded for that. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. You can earn on hundreds of items, groceries, beauty supplies, toys for the dogs or for the kids, all of that. You can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year in cash back. That could cover most of an entire big shopping trip. That flight you've been looking at, maybe you got a deal. This could cover that too. Even the fancy dinner you want to take your significant other out, bang, you've got it done with that money back. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, places like Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta and using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store or the Google Play Store, download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege. That's IBOTTA, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. And we are getting closer to football season, which means we do have another new sponsor with us today, too. That is going to be Factor Meals. Now, another thing in the summer is you're trying to eat healthy. You're trying to, maintain that beach bod a little bit, but you also want to keep it chill. We've got those warm, sunny days. They're here now. You don't want to spend too much time bogged down on what you're cooking. Factor is the way that you do that. With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from each week, you'll always have new flavors to explore. You're going to crush your wellness goals with dietitian-approved meals and ingredients you can trust. So treat yourself to restaurant-quality meals that feature premium ingredients. I'm talking filet mignon. I'm talking shrimp. I'm talking blackened salmon. no shortage of the great stuff, and it's good for you, and it's easy to do. It's effortless. You can choose from 6 menu items and preferences to help you manage calories, maximize your protein intake, avoid meat, anything you're looking for, and it's so fast. Most Factor meals are ready in 2 minutes. No shopping, no prepping, cooking, or cleaning up. Just head to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 and use the code LockedOnCollege50, that's 50, to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. I'm going to say that again. That's code LockedOnCollege50, 50, at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is added. Thank you to Factor Meals. I went on and on about identity, okay? And I think first and foremost for this 2024 summer and therefore the 25-26 recruiting cycles, the best identity Baylor could get after the last few years, both on the field and on the recruiting trail, was good. Good players. Bring them in the door. And by the way, I do want to link this back to person over player. How much have we heard that over the last few years? And every time it was not a good recruiting class, we would hear person over player. These things matter. And they do. They do. But also a few months ago, we heard that they're not really hammering that down as much. They don't want to get too bogged down into that and just trip over molehills while missing big prospects. Again, that's not to say they're recruiting bad people. In fact, that's the point I am making, is you see they're getting some big time 4-star guys in here, and they all seem like great kids. Their coaches rave about them. They have a great, they're good on social media. They're not trashing other places. Maybe they have a little bit of fun at their signing day or their commitment day, but it's not like, again, Baylor's not recruiting thugs out here. They're recruiting good kids who are good players as well. And that's what they needed. That's what they needed. They needed to stop getting bogged down too much in person over player because it wasn't working on the football field and in recruiting, which then in turn would lead to not working on the football field. And they've more or less ditched that slogan while still trying to use it in principle. And that's what I think a lot of us were thinking. And Javon Overshone from Baylor football was saying it in that story that I believe was by Sam Kahn Jr. of, you can practice it and it can still mean the same thing without saying it all the time and basically it being out there for ammo to be used against you. And so Baylor can show person over player by recruiting the guys they're recruiting right now because they are good players who are also good people. And I think that was the first thing that Baylor needed to do in terms of an identity for these next few recruiting classes. The other one is speed. Speed kills. You can't teach speed. Clyde Hart probably can, but most people can't teach speed. You either have it or you don't. And that identity is what led Baylor to its most fruitful era on the football field in the history of the program in the Bryles years. That's something they identified as, look, Bryles comes in, we're the doormat of the Big 12. And one way that we can get this back is with an exciting offense that's tough to defend, that I don't necessarily need blue chip guys. I can get track stars, make them wide receivers, and we can win a lot of football games. Okay, you saw that with some guys like, Tevin Reese or Levi Norwood. And then once the success starts to come, you can mix in Corey Coleman's. You can mix in Katie Cannons, who was a huge recruit. And by establishing that identity, Baylor is already, and this would be the case 3 or 4 weeks ago before they started getting these blue chip guys, at least they were in a more stable position than they were a year or two ago. Because if we're being honest, I don't know that they were recruiting to their strengths and to their identity as much. This wasn't a high school recruit, but you get a guy like Sawyer Robertson, who's an air raid quarterback, and you're running a wide zone. Or you're not getting the top offensive lineman in Texas. and you're supposed to be a smash mouth kind of football team. Defensively, you want to be really aggressive rushing the passer. They didn't recruit those guys. So it was like, yeah, this is what we want it to be. This is what we're saying, but we're not proving it by the guys that we're bringing in. Now they are. They say we want to be a speed team, and they're going out and getting those guys. Ja'Cory Watson, Taz Williams, now someone like Ryelan Morris, Michael Turner Jr. from Richland Hills, the running back. All these guys ooze that. And even some of the ones who aren't the 4 stars were showing off that speed and saying, this is our identity. This is what we're going to be. And I think that shows that this is something that they are building on for the next couple of years. So that's why I mentioned in the first segment that Jake Spavital has a lot to do with this. Obviously, it's his offense coming in, right? But we have seen Spavital over the years, and through a few different stops, he can adjust. This is the type of system he wants to run, but he's run some variations of this throughout his stops based on what his personnel was at the time. What we are seeing on the recruiting trail is a directive from Dave Aranda and probably from Mac Rhodes as well of this is something we have identified as a system that can work, and we are giving you the keys to this. That's why when I see all these big time recruits week after week here, the more I think this is more than a 1-year thing for Dave Aranda. They've already given him some patience to figure it out. And now that they finally have momentum on the recruiting trail and they have that identity, it's going to be tough to just say, no, we don't want that anymore. It's going to be really tough to do that. And so Jake Spavital clearly had such a good sell to these guys, to the higher ups, to Dave Aranda, to Mac Rhodes, to the football program, to Javon Overshone as well, that, hey, this is the identity we're going to look at as a football team. Here's why it can still work. Here's why it's going to be successful for Baylor. And it is clear that they have kind of given them the keys. And I do want to mention one more thing from the Ryelan Morris story. I just lost it. About who he shouts out, because this is going to start to becoming like, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? Or where's Waldo? Where is he going to mention Keenan Hall? Oklahoma, Oregon, USC, nearly 20 others were on the list of offers for Ryelan Morris. Those are pretty good football programs. You might have heard of them. But Keenan Hall was the first one to offer him when he was still at SMU, of course. He offered Ryelan Morris before he had ever stepped on a high school football field. That is the real secret sauce to Keenan Hall. He doesn't just see really great players and can swoop in and make a great deal for them and sweeten the pot. He is identifying talent very early in the cycle to say, this guy is really good and we're going to be one of his first offers. That's what impresses me the most. And clearly, that is making a huge difference. Because all these guys say the same thing. They shout out Keenan Hall. And what is the other thing they say? Baylor made me feel like more than a football player. And they were saying that as well with some of the other lackluster recruiting classes we've seen over the last few years. But again, the theme of this segment, they're not just being told that they're more than a football player. They're being shown that. Ryland Morris, his first offer before he steps on a high school football field. Caden Knighton from the class of 25, another composite 4-star guy. Baylor was his first offer. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about with the trust. And by the way, they do expect Ryelan Morris to be a running back, and that's what several other coaches have said as well. The fact that Keenan Hall can identify these guys. By the way, Keenan Hall was coaching running backs at SMU as well. So he projected Ryelan Morris to be a running back. And now a few years later, all the other coaches are too. The eye for talent is incredible. The summer of Keenan Hall is what we are forced to call it. Today's episode of Locked On Baylor is also brought to you by FanDuel. You guys know how much I love sports. I wish there was more going on right now. I really do. But that's what we get with the summer. And we're actually blessed that it's an Olympic year. But for the most part, there's just not a lot that's really scintillating for us right now. So this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. Something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. That is FanDuel.com. Thanks for sponsoring this video, FanDuel. It doesn't mean a thing if they don't succeed this year. This recruiting class is great, and the recruiting momentum is off the charts good. But there are two glaring things that I have mentioned and that I will mention again that would make, pause for concern. And that is one, they have not signed on the dotted line yet. We all know, we all have PTSD in terms of the recruiting signing day, not knowing that we weren't going to got some guys to the door. We know that more than most other schools. The second part is, it doesn't mean a thing if Baylor football stinks again this year. It just doesn't. Because while it might not mean that Dave Aranda loses his job for the reasons that I outlined earlier in the show, it might be, concern for these guys who have recruited of like, I really bought into this vision and they stunk again this year. They went 3-9 again, or they went 4-8. It's tougher to buy in. And so that's why I look at specifically the great running back recruits that they have gotten commitments from and thought this was supposed to be the strong suit of the offense last year. And I think you have a good crop of running backs this year, but it's the same, if not worse, than what we were looking for a year ago. Right? We were saying Richard Reese coming off freshman of the year in the Big 12 kind of season, offensive freshman of the year. He was great. He set the rushing record for yards by a freshman in Baylor history. He had 14 touchdowns. He was a real bright spot on a team that underachieved, kind of a guy that kind of came out of nowhere. And then they brought Dominic Richardson in through the door in the transfer portal. And I was on Twitter and on Inside the Bears saying, this is your Abram Smith. You didn't have an Abram Smith in 2022. Now you've got one for 2023. And they stunk running the ball last year. They stunk. They were second to last in the conference in rushing yards per game. Thank you, BYU. And there was a lot that went into that. They were down a lot of the time. They did not have a good offensive line, but the numbers are the numbers. And Dominic Richardson had one rushing touchdown last year. Richard Reese had two. They were against Long Island. He had two special teams touchdowns, but in between, he didn't play. He wasn't getting any touches. And Dawson Pendergrass was a bright spot. But it was because those other two guys weren't getting it done or weren't getting the looks that they needed. And that became arguably the most disappointing unit. Obviously, the offensive line was the worst, but in terms of what you expected the running backs to be a big advantage for you. You expected Baylor to be one of the best rushing teams in the conference. And they were obviously far from that, to the point where in their final win of the season, when they beat Cincinnati, they didn't run the ball until 5 minutes left in the first half of that game. It was passing every down, and they actually won that game. Like that was an identity crisis 6 games into the year. And Baylor can't afford to have that again. So I say I really like this running back stable, and I do, but that's with me basically flushing last year, which I don't think is fair. If I'm going to say how great everything is on the recruiting trail, I wish I could sit here and say that I like the running backs room, but I don't know how good they're going to be running the football. because I don't know that their offensive line necessarily got better. The best guy you brought in the transfer portal had to medically retire. And you brought in some what looked like nice pieces, with Fugar and Thomason, but they come in after spring ball. How are they just going to be ready to go week 1 against Tarleton? They're just going to be slotted in there at tackle? Maybe. But A, it's a tough thing to do. And B, if they are slotting in there at tackle, you have to worry about the chemistry of the offensive line. You just do. I really think that is the position on the field that really needs chemistry. I think it's the only one that really needs chemistry is the offensive line and 5 guys working together. And I don't know that Baylor has that. And I don't know that they have high-end talent just yet. So I am thinking on the positive side with the running backs the same way I was last year. But I think it's going to take a lot for them to make a big-time jump running the football. You've got a new offensive line coach in there, a guy who comes from the FCS level. After being at Mississippi State, he was at Tarleton. And I think you have an offensive coordinator who can help a lot with that, with the work he did with Cal last year running the football. But it's tough for me to sit here on July 29th and just tell you, don't worry, we're going to get the 2022 Dom Richardson at Oklahoma State. We're going to get the 2022 Richard Reese. It's going to be all good. Just wait. If you don't think they're going to be good, you're going to be sorry. I don't know. We like Dawson Pendergrass. I hope we see some Bryson Washington this year after an injury last year. I think they can be dynamic. I think they can attack you a couple different ways on the ground, but I can't sit here and say it's going to be all great. And so that goes for the future too. I think you've got great running backs coming in the next 2 recruiting classes, but you've also got to figure out the offensive line, which is something, of course, we will talk about before we get the season started. Anyway, thank you for making this your first listen today and every day. Let me know what you think about this crop of running backs in 2024, whether Baylor will be able to run the football. Please drop that down in the comments below. Or if you're listening to us on podcast form, you don't follow us on YouTube, first off, like and subscribe. That's always great. But you can tweet at us at Locked On Baylor as well. Let me know what you think about that and this new recruit coming in Ryelan Morris, and just overall the Keenan Hall effect. I know I ask for that a lot, but drop that down in the comments below, or just say, hey, tell me what you're doing this summer. I don't know. It all helps the algorithm. But seriously, again, thank you for making it your first listen today and every day, because we are back to 5 days a week. You're going to be hearing me a lot more. We are back tomorrow. We're going to have some mailbags before the season starts. We're going to have some season previews before the season starts for opponents. We're going to have some season previews on the depth chart for Baylor, all that and more coming up in what's going to be an exciting month. We also have some basketball to sprinkle in this week as well. Be sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment. We will see you tomorrow on your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.